Did Cory the Sandman Sandhagen just become the #1 contender in the bantamweight division for the UFC? That is the biggest question to ask in the aftermath of UFC Des Moines, Iowa, where Cory Sandhagen has now won 4 of his last 5 fights. He bounces back from his August loss to Umar Nurmagomedov with a victory over the former flyweight champion turned 3-1 bantamweight contender Deiveson Figueiredo, and he did it with flying colors. Had a very impressive round number 1, had a very impressive round number 2, and it ultimately led to him getting the stoppage 4 minutes and 8 seconds into round number 2, partially for the skill set of Cory Sandhagen and his work in the grappling transitions on the ground, and partially due to a freak accident and an injury on the side of Deiveson Figueiredo, where it looked like his left knee, if I remember correctly, popped at a very weird angle, but that was because of the leg lock and the transitioning that Cory Sandhagen was doing in order to stay on top. But regardless, this was a hell of a performance from Cory Sandhagen. He looked incredible for the 9 minutes and 8 seconds that we got to see him compete in the headlining spot here in Iowa. The first time the UFC had returned to the state since June of 2000, and the first time ever in the city of Des Moines, and Cory Sandhagen showed out. And even in his losing effort to Umar Nurmagomedov last August in their Abu Dhabi main event slot, it was a very competitive, back-and-forth, high-level mixed martial arts competition, one of the best, more high-level bouts of all of 2024, and it was just the night that belonged to Umar Nurmagomedov instead of Cory Sandhagen, and we've seen what has now happened for both gentlemen in the aftermath. Umar will go on to fight at UFC 311 against Merab Dvalishvili in Merab's first title defense, and he would lose that fight, and he would lose his perfect record to the dominant champion that is Merab Dvalishvili, and now Cory Sandhagen has bounced back, got a victory over Deiveson Figueiredo, again, has won 4 of his last 5 bouts. The wins are Figgy, Rob Font, Marlon Vera, and another finish over Song Yadong. Ever since Cory entered the UFC back in January of 2018 after coming over from LFA, it was clear how high level that he was. It was clear that his ceiling was very, very high 7 years ago when he would have just been 26, and now he is 33 years old. He is right in his prime, and to be quite frank with you, he continues, in my opinion, to get better and better fight by fight, and he always just shows some sort of evolution, whether it's a very big jump, like him using his grappling skills as much and as successfully as he did here against Deiveson, as he did against Rob Font, even though he had a torn tricep in that fight, or if it's even little minute details here and there that can make drastic differences over the course of a 15 or 25 minute bout. It's clear that Cory Sandhagen is amongst the elite of the elite in this bantamweight division. Dare I say, the second best 135-pound fighter on planet Earth right now, behind the champion that is Merab Dvalishvili. So not only does the resume and the skill set of Cory Sandhagen line him up to be next in line for a title shot, but when you pair in the fact that he has not fought Merab and he has not fought Sean O'Malley, you think that his chances of getting a shot at gold in the aftermath of UFC 316 coming up June 7th, just a little over a month's time, all signs seem to be pointing toward Cory Sandhagen getting the winner of that bout. But I will say, in my opinion, should Sean O'Malley beat Merab and get revenge for his Noche UFC loss last September when he lost his title, I think the UFC will obviously try and gun for that trilogy fight because Merab has built his stardom quite high over the last few years, and Sean O'Malley, one of the biggest names in the sport today. If he gets that win and halts the momentum of Merab and takes his title back, you can bet your bottom dollar the UFC will run that trilogy at the end of the year, at least in my opinion. But if they don't run the trilogy and Sean O'Malley wins, I've always wanted to see Cory Sandhagen versus Sean O'Malley. As a matter of fact, when Sean lost his title at Noche UFC to Merab, that is the fight that I called for. Cory Sandhagen, Sean O'Malley. Maybe I can find the tape and run it here for you. Please, 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 UFC, Sean O'Malley, Cory Sandhagen, the long, rangy, diverse strikers. Please, him versus Sugar Sean would be a masterfully high-level, highly skilled bout in this 135-pound weight class. And if Sean loses to Merab and goes 0-2 against the champ, then we get to see Cory Sandhagen get his crack to see if he can solve the puzzle that is Merab Dvalishvili, who has gone many, many years and double-digit fights unbeaten at this point. So if I'm Cory Sandhagen, I'm hoping that Merab can go 2-0 against Sean O'Malley and then solidify myself as the #1 contender at the end of 2025. But let's say that Sean O'Malley does get the nod over Merab next month. Let's say that the UFC does book the trilogy between Merab and Sean at the end of 2025 to settle the score, then what do we do with Cory Sandhagen? That's the second biggest question in the aftermath. Well, if that is the case, I would run Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen Part 2 for a true number one contendership bout. Winner gets next of the winner of the trilogy. Again, this is the circumstance if Sean O'Malley wins in June and the UFC books the trilogy fight. Then and only then would I do Petr Yan versus Cory Sandhagen. They both fought in 2021 with a title on the line. Petr Yan got the nod in one of my favorite, actually I'm pretty sure it was my favorite fight of all of 2021, one of the most high-level fights that you will see over the last 4 years. And since then, in October of 2021, both gentlemen have went on to have 5 fights. There's been plenty of time and plenty of experience against other opponents to allow this fight to happen once again now 4 years later. For Petr Yan, he would go on to lose 3 consecutive bouts after his win over Cory Sandhagen. Aljamain Sterling, he'd lose the title, then he would lose a very close fight to Sean O'Malley, and then he would lose to Merab Dvalishvili. But since that 3-fight skid, Petr Yan has now won back-to-back fights over Song Yadong and over Deiveson Figueiredo, and after that win in November against Figgy, I was calling for Petr Yan to get a rematch against Merab, but instead, the UFC did Merab versus Umar, and now we're getting Merab versus Sean. So let's keep Petr Yan from waiting any longer and book him against Cory Sandhagen, the rematch. And the final scenario that I want to talk through here is if Merab beats Sean O'Malley next month in June and goes 2-0, then we see Cory versus Merab for the title. Let's do Petr Yan versus Umar Nurmagomedov. We just checked every single box in every single scenario. Now I just need you to let me know if you agree or how you would do it differently if you were in the war room come Tuesday morning with Dana White and the fellas. And quickly for Deiveson Figueiredo, he started out his bantamweight journey 3-0 and looked like he was one win away from getting a title shot before being halted by Petr Yan, and now a 2-fight losing streak after his loss to Cory Sandhagen this past Saturday. What do we do next for the 37-year-old former flyweight turned bantamweight? Well, if Henry Cejudo plans to fight anymore, I would absolutely run that fight. 2 guys that used to be sitting amongst the top of the top at flyweight, title defenses from both men in that weight class. Now let's get it in their 135-pound late stretch of their careers. Henry Cejudo, Deiveson Figueiredo, that's the fight to do. Book it, please, by the end of the year. Let's go. And now that we are done with the UFC Des Moines, Iowa main event recap, let's jump into the rest of the card and talk about some of the other most meaningful results before we head on out of here today. And it starts in the co-main event. Bo Nickal, no longer undefeated. Multiple national championships in wrestling at Penn State University. A 7-0 perfect undefeated mixed martial arts record with 6 of those coming by way of finish. Bo Nickal came into UFC Des Moines in the co-main event looking to break into the top 15 at middleweight for the first time in his UFC career. I guess technically second. They had him at like number 15 for like 1 week and then they bounced him out. It was kind of weird. But instead, he suffers the first loss of his young career at just 29 years old, but in devastating fashion as Reinier De Ridder, the former 2-weight world champion in 1 championship, looked like a bully in this fight. Did Bo Nickal have some success with a takedown or 2, with a submission threat? Yes, he did. But outside of that, Reinier De Ridder looked much larger in this fight. He looked much stronger, and he truly imposed his will on Bo Nickal with the dirty boxing and knees in the clinch, with his rangy strikes, landing some nice hooks in the second round, and the knees to the body, both in the clinch and the finishing knee, where he came in from a distance and pounced on Bo Nickal up against the cage. What a performance from Reinier De Ridder, the former multi-weight class world champion in 1, turned top 15 middleweight, and now after this performance, dare I say maybe a future middleweight title contender. He's now 3-0 since making his debut in the UFC in November of last year, so he is remaining very active. He has a 3rd-round finish, a 1st-round finish, and now a 2nd-round finish. The man can get it done in all aspects, in all minutes and times of the fight. He is dangerous, truly, from minute 1 to minute 15. 6'4", 34 years old, right in his prime, 20 wins, only 2 losses, and 18 of those 20 wins by way of finish. Reinier De Ridder just put the world on notice, put the middleweight division on notice, and put Bo Nickal on notice. that there is levels to this game. The Dutch Knight hailing from the Netherlands, Reinier De Ridder, RDR. This man has a legitimate ceiling now in the UFC. Yes, it's Bo Nickal. There's definitely people that hated on him and doubted him to begin with, but you can't deny the fashion in which Reinier De Ridder got the job done here is ultra impressive, and now it's going to be big fights only for the rest of his UFC run for as long as it lasts. And this win couldn't have came at a more important time because the middleweight division has been churning so far in the first 4 months of 2025. There were 5 ranked matchups in the month of February. We've had a title be defended between Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. Things are moving right now, and now he can join in on the discussion. He doesn't have to be on the outside looking in. He is very much relevant in who the elite people are in this 185-pound weight class, and I think before the end of the year, Reinier De Ridder could be nearing the top 5. If I'm the UFC and I'm looking to strategically matchmake for Reinier De Ridder moving forward, I think there's 3 names that you can pinpoint that all solidify him with a victory moving up nearer to title contention. First one is the number 10 ranked Marvin Vettori, a former title challenger, always been amongst the top 10 for years at this point. Next would be the number 8 ranked Roman Dolidze, who's coming off of a victory over Marvin Vettori, and the other would be the number 7 ranked former title challenger Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. I think any of those 3 guys, all rightful next steps up in competition for Reinier De Ridder, makes sense after what he has been able to do through 3 UFC fights thus far. A sloppy fight, yes, in his debut against Gerald Meerschaert, but a finish nonetheless. Then he dominated Kevin Holland in their fight before finishing him in the first round, and then here against Bo Nickal, not only does he stop his perfect record, he puts a stop to him in the second round, and not by submission like we're used to seeing RDR do. He did it with a brutal knockout with knees to the body. This man is a problem. He's long, he's rangy, he's strong, and he can be a legitimate title threat at 185 pounds. In the aftermath of this fight, I even saw people tossing out the idea of how fun a fight between him, RDR, and Dricus du Plessis, DDP, would be. And so at this point, depending on the type of matchmaking that the UFC does, if you ask me right now how far away is Reinier De Ridder from challenging for a title, I would tell you he needs 2 more wins. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of people out there that have a whole lot to say about Bo Nickal. The haters were coming out in full force heading into the bout, and especially in the aftermath of this fight. And does Bo Nickal kind of garner some of that attention toward himself? Does he act cocky and arrogant at times? Maybe a little, but I think it's more so confidence that he carries. But this was a wake-up call, and it's not too late to make the adjustments. Again, he just started fighting professionally in June of 2022, not even 3 years ago yet. He's had 8 fights, and 7 of them have been under the UFC banner between Dana White Contender Series and the actual UFC. He's 29 years old. We know that he has the wrestling skills. Now he just has to finish up the rest of his game. Can he polish up the striking? Can he polish up his back game? Because when he was down on the mat with Reinier on top, he could not do anything. I still think that there is a ceiling for Bo Nickal, but is it as high as I thought it was heading into this bout? No, there's definitely been a drop in that ceiling, but that is not to say that in 3, 4, 5 years' time, he can't be challenging for middleweight gold still. I think it's possible, but this fight just showed he has to make drastic changes over the next few fights and over the next few years to prove all of the hype that he had around him when he made his UFC debut can come full circle and come to fruition before it's too late. Next, we go to the featured bout between 2 guys that fight pretty much the exact same. They're pretty much the same size. I think they're around the same age. Daniel Rodriguez, Santiago Ponzinibbio. We knew that we were going to get 2 guys that went in there, met in the pocket, and boxed from the first minute all the way to the 15th minute. But we didn't need the full 15 in this one, as Daniel Rodriguez got the finish over Santiago in the 3rd round, 1 minute and 12 seconds in, with a brutal combination that sent Santiago down to the canvas and at one point, when he tried to protest the stoppage, he stumbled himself straight into the fence. D-Rod had found himself on a 3-fight skid between November of 2022 and June of 2024, but since then has turned it around. He's tallied off 2 back-to-back victories, a close one over Alex Morono, and the finish over the veteran Santiago Ponzinibbio, who has now made 20 walks to the octagon. And for what it's worth, if you look at that 3-fight skid, Kelvin Gastelum, Ian Gary, and Neil Magny. It's not like he was losing to some people on the outside looking in. The problem for D-Rod is that he is now 38 years old, so he does not have a lot of time left. Time is not necessarily on his side, but I know for as long as he's in the company, he will be in fun fights. That's a guarantee. I'd love to see him get one more fight, maybe right on the cusp of top 15, and if he can tally off a 3rd straight win, maybe he can make one final run toward the top 10. Yana Santos, at 35 years old, just got the biggest win of her career as she beat Miesha Tate pretty convincingly, may I add, as she got a 29-28 unanimous decision win. She looked great in rounds 1 and 2, keeping Miesha Tate at distance and looking very sharp with her strikes. Now, to be fair, did Miesha Tate have the greatest of game plans in the first 2 rounds? Let's say probably not, after we saw her success in round number 3, going for the takedown, getting it, and holding the back mount, nearly getting the rear naked choke finish in the 3rd round, which is what won her that round. But outside of that, Yana did what she had to do. She game planned correctly. She kept the fight at a distance. She kept the fight on the feet, and she found success against Cupcake Miesha Tate. Got her 2nd consecutive win. She'll hold her spot in the top 10 of the women's bantamweight division. I know it's not the greatest of divisions. There's not a ton of movement in fights that happen in this weight class, unfortunately, but she remains relevant. She puts herself in a spot where she could be 1 to 2 wins away from challenging for a title. So we kind of just have to wait and see how the UFC wants to do this division, with the title fight happening next month between Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison at UFC 316. And for Miesha Tate, she made this big comeback after nearly 5 years away in July of 2021. Jumped right into the top 15 by taking out Marion Renault with a 3rd round finish. And people were like, oh my goodness, she's what? This would have been when she was still 34, 35 years old. There's still a chance Miesha can make a run here. But since then, she's lost 3 of her next 4 bouts. She's only fought 5 times in total in what is soon to be 4 years since coming back from retirement. There just hasn't been a lot of activity. And after this fight, there haven't been a ton of improvements in her skill set. Yes, her physique looks better than it has ever looked before, but here against Yana Santos, the game plan, that just wasn't it. And of course, we have to talk about her lone experiment down at 125 pounds against Lauren Murphy. Even if you want to throw that out, she's still 2-2 since returning in her home of 135 pounds, the other loss being to Ketlin Vieira, although I remember watching that back in November of 2021, thinking it was much closer than the unanimous decision scorecard said. But now she's 38. Again, 3 of her last 4 fights have been losses. What do we really do with Miesha Tate, who is number 12 coming in here? She didn't retire in the aftermath, for what it's worth, but I think it's clear here that there's not a lot of fights left, and there's definitely not enough fights left for her to get all the way back to title contention. Had she beat Yana Santos and put herself back in the top 10, I could have seen her being fast-tracked to a title shot after picking up probably just one more win against a top 10 opponent, but that is now not the case, and I'm very curious to see what Miesha Tate will decide to do with her career and what the UFC will try to do with her in terms of matchmaking. Time will tell. Next, we jump to the middleweight division, where Azamat Bekoev improved to 2-0 in the UFC with his 2nd consecutive first-round stoppage, this time over Ultimate Fighter alum Ryan Loder. He finished him in just 2 minutes and 44 seconds. And I'm going to be honest with you here, Bekoev could be a legitimate threat here in the back half of the top 15 of the middleweight division, as he has not lost a fight since September of 2021. He's on an 8-fight win streak, with 5 of them coming by way of finish, 20-3 overall, with 16 victories coming by way of stoppage, and he's 29 years old, just now hitting his prime. Azamat Bekoev, remember that name, because in 1 or 2 more fights, he could be a top 15 middleweight. Gillian Robertson continues to find success since moving down to strawweight, as she is now 5-1 since jumping down to 115 back in April of 2023, being one of the most active fighters on the UFC women's rosters for years and years at this point, and now her momentum presses forward once more. She's on a 4-fight win streak, and look at the last 3. Michelle Waterson Gomez, Luana Pinheiro, and now Marina Rodriguez. By the way, finishing Marina Rodriguez in the second round via TKO, where she dominated this fight from pillar to post. And honestly, her coach Dean Thomas said it best: when she's in these fights, she's either dominating, running through her opponents, or she's losing. There's no real middle ground, and honestly, the results show. And still, somehow, someway, after all of these years and all of these fights at flyweight and now strawweight, she is still just 29 years old. Gillian Robertson is hitting her stride. She's entering her prime, and come Tuesday morning, she will be a top 10 strawweight in the world, and it's not crazy to think, if the matchmaking is done correctly, she could be one win away from a title shot. And I think someone that could get her to that title shot would be either Mackenzie Dern or Amanda Lemos. Then I think you do Zhang Weili versus Virna Jandiroba. You do Gillian versus one of those two ladies I just mentioned, and then the winners of those will fight one another. Yes, if Zhang Weili continues to defend her title, she will probably get a super fight up a weight class at flyweight, but that title has to be defended first at UFC 315 this upcoming weekend between Valentina and Manon Fior, so we'll revisit to that discussion here soon. But regardless, Gillian Robertson, give her a top 5 fighter next. Mackenzie Dern, Amanda Lemos, either of those two women. Put it on a main event, by the way. Give Gillian a chance to showcase her skills over the course of 25 minutes, even though she doesn't need decisions that often, having finished 12 of her 16 wins, the most finishes, by the way, in women's history in the UFC. Gillian Robertson at strawweight could be not only a future title challenger, but dare I say, a future champion. And last but not least, the first finish of the night belonged to Quang, who is now 9-2, and he got his first victory in the UFC after starting 0-2. He's 33 years old in this bantamweight division. Am I saying he has a very high ceiling? No, this fight wasn't necessarily that great for the first 5 minutes, but he did get a finish pretty early on in the second round with the rear naked choke over Gaston Bolanos 1 minute and 54 seconds into that middle round. But hailing from Vietnam, finishing 6 of his 9 wins, the nickname Bang, he comes in looking to finish fights if at all possible, and for that reason alone, he could be a part of some fun ones moving forward at 135, maybe the deepest division in all of the UFC. So that is it for today's recap. The UFC's returned to Iowa for the first time since June of 2000, the first time ever in Des Moines, Iowa, because the first one took place in Cedar Rapids. Pretty solid night overall. I didn't get to watch every single fight from start to finish as I would have liked because I was at a wedding, but I did get to see those meaningful finishes and talk about the most important results and what is in the aftermath to come, and that is my favorite thing to do. Talk about the storylines, talk about the stakes involved, and now I want to turn it over to you all to give me your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are inching closer and closer to that 1,000 subscriber mark, and we want to hit it, fingers crossed, in 2025. Just a little over 200 to go. With over half of the year remaining, my hopes are high. I think we can press forward, keep building this community, and see where we can take this thing. I appreciate any and all support. I love getting on here every single week and just expressing my love and passion for this sport, giving myself an outlet to discuss it with people, because yes, MMA and the UFC specifically continues to grow at a very rapid rate, but in the grand scheme of things, it is still a very niche topic and a very niche sport. So getting this out there to as many people as possible, seeing your comments, seeing your predictions, your takeaways is so much fun to see, to read, and to even start discussions with you all. So feel free to let me know all your thoughts on this weekend's fights down in the comments below, as well as your early predictions for next weekend's fights. But don't worry, we'll have separate videos coming up previewing UFC 315 in the coming days. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, TikTok, and you can like the Facebook page as well. And lastly, you can follow along on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where podcast episodes release there every Monday and Friday. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you all in the next video.